available on our website. All right. Well, welcome everybody on Zoom and in person. My name is Katie Liberman. I'm our community programs coordinator here at Herringut Coastal Science Center. And I'm very excited for the next installment of our Cabin Fever series, where we welcome experts in the fields of marine sciences, aquaculture, fisheries, and more to talk about their subject area of choice. And we usually have lots of food and community in these events, and so that's why I like them. So if you don't like the chili, don't tell me because I don't want to know.
It was delicious.
Sorry to the Zoom participants for not getting chili. Maybe you can join us next time. And so I just want to thank you all for coming, and thanks to the staff and volunteers that are here. We have plenty of staff and volunteers hiding around in the room and on Zoom. We have some board members here as well, so welcome. Just wanted to also thank our sponsors and donors. We have a couple of community sponsors for these programs. The West Bay Rotary Club is our community program sponsor, and then the Machias Savings Bank is one of our big business donors, so thank you. And then I also wanted to highlight a couple of upcoming programs, shameless plugs here coming up. So of course we have the next Cabin Fever, the final one in the series on February 5th. So be sure to stop by Herringut or Zoom in. We also have the Fishing Families program that's at the town hall. I don't think I have a flyer over here, but it's listed on our website. So it's at the St. George Town Hall. There'll be pizza and seltzers there. We also have an aquatanz for littles at the Jackson Memorial Library coming up February 11th. So if you have some toddlers in your life that could use some music and movement and science, that's the program for them. It's a very fun family event. We'll also have a Maine Master Naturalist, newly minted, Joshua Gooley. So he's an educator at the 4-H Blueberry Cove Camp. He's been volunteering with us to do some programming, so be sure to stay tuned for all of those upcoming programs. We've got one coming up for tracking in the snow, terrestrial animals. So I will hand things off to Sarah to introduce our speaker today, and then you'll need to turn the camera around.
Okay, so hopefully I'll remember that part.
At least delicious.
All right, it's so great to see you all. My name is Sarah Oaktai. I'm the executive director of Herringut, and I'm really proud of Katie for doing such an amazing job on our community programs, and I'm proud of all of you for showing up, because it's no fun to do a big program and have no one there. So we have over 30 people participating today. This expands our reach, provides us new things to learn about throughout the winter, helps all of our staff and myself learn about what's going on. Our feature for the Division of Marine Resources is going to be really awesome in February, and it will help all of us understand what does the DMR do here in Maine and why they're so important. So today I'm introducing Deborah Bronk. She joined Bigelow Laboratory in 2015, February of 2018 as its president and CEO. Bigelow Laboratory is one of the largest marine science institutions in the Northeast. She earned her PhD in marine estuarine and environmental sciences from the University of Maryland. She's an expert on nitrogen and nitrogen fluxes. She's got more than 2 decades of experience as a professor and an oceanographer. You all recall, I'm an oceanographer, so yet another reason to love Deb. She's been on more than 50 research cruises and has done field studies from pole to pole in marine and freshwater environments. She's the past president of the Oceanography Society and the past chair of the UNOLS Council, that is the University National Oceanographic Laboratory System that takes care of our fleet of scientific vessels around the country and world. In 2020, she was recognized as the fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. She also served as a division director for the National Science Foundation's Division of Ocean Science. I'm hoping you're getting the point that she is a big deal. She was the president for the Association for Sciences and Limnology and Oceanography. So not only has she done a lot of research and has brought so much to Maine, but she's also served in almost every capacity that an oceanographer can throughout the country to enable us to do more science. Currently, and this is how I met her, I'd already knew about her. She's the leader of the Maine Marine Science Consortium, and the Maine Ocean Science Leadership Team, and I'm part of both of those, and Herring Gut is part of MMSC. And this group is a group of all the science and educational groups in the state, including folks at the University of Maine, the Rue Institute, Gulf of Maine Research Institute, down east, and I could go on and on. All of us working together to enable science and education and get funding for both of those and reach more students and more communities in the state of Maine. And last but not least, Deb is a really great mentor to me, very inspirational, a ton of fun, as you're going to find out, and just an incredible leader and a great speaker. And this will be a masterclass in all things science-wise. So now that I've totally beefed you up, here is Deb.
I know, no pressure there, Sarah. Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. It has been such a pleasure to get to know Sarah. She's a big deal as well, and it's just been a lot of fun. We had our last Maine Ocean Leadership Team meeting at Herring Gut, and the place blows me away with how much you accomplish with such a small staff. And so just really kudos to the staff. So normally when I do these kind of talks, and can you hear me okay? Is my volume okay?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So normally when I give these talks, I talk a lot about Bigelow. And today I'm actually not going to talk about Bigelow all that much, although I'll stick us in here and there. This is more of a general talk about science in the United States because we are really in a crisis. And this is something that I'm spending a lot of my time working on through an organization called the Research and Education Coalition for Ocean Sciences, which is an organization that I helped start to be an advocacy group on the Hill for ocean research and education. Because apparently I don't have enough to already do, but there was a real vacuum in terms of who was on the Hill with Congress educating about what ocean science brings and really what science brings. So to start off with, I'm going to ask you all to please just sit for a minute and think about all of the children in your life, your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, your neighbors' kids. And as you go through those children, put a red line through every fifth name, because that is the situation this country was in 1900. 1 out of every 5 children didn't make it to their 5th birthday. That's just really staggering. But I think it's a tribute to this country's investment in science and all that has done across many fields of science, whether it's hygiene, the simple importance of washing your hands, the development of antibiotics, the development of vaccines, the reducing the danger of food poisoning, safer cars, safer airplanes. We now have a life expectancy, especially for our children, that was, unimaginable 125 years ago. And that is the gift, really, of science. So I think in many ways, this country's path of science really started in a major way in the Second World War. During World War II, the greatest generation came to the Allies' rescue overseas, pushed back fascism, and science, especially ocean science, played a really critical role in the U.S. success in that war. And it set this country on a path where investment in science was considered really important for lots of different reasons: our economy, our health, but especially our national security and military strength. The next kind of crisis came when the USSR launched Sputnik, and that was really the start of the space race, and the belief that we as a country could not allow supremacy of another country in space, especially a country with nuclear weapons. And we won that space race basically when we landed July 20th, 1969. Apollo 11 took Neil Armstrong to the moon and back. Just at the time, unimaginable triumph for the science and engineering and technology in this country. And that is probably more than any other thing, I would say, put this country on the path of being a visionary global leader in science and technology. And we have been reaping the benefits of that ever since. So what has this science supremacy really cost us? Because there's a lot we're talking about in terms of budgets and debt in this country. The fraction of the US budget invested in R&D across the agencies, and this is research and development. This does not actual development of weapons, though. But the research and development across the agencies is about 3% of our federal budget. So I fully acknowledge we have a debt situation in this country, but I would argue that cutting the 3% we invest in research is not the way to address this. In fact, investing in science and technology is how we keep this economy strong and how we pave the way to pay this debt off. Cutting research investment, I would argue, is like a farmer that says he's going to save money one year by deciding not to buy any seeds. It just doesn't make any economic sense. But what are we facing now in this country? Right now, we've got division and politicalization of science that has been growing for decades. This is not new, it's been growing. The rapid growth of social media, of fake news, of alternative facts, just the explosion of news outlets and entertainment outlets have made science much more political. We can now just listen to people that just agree with everything we say. We don't ever have to hear different opinions. And science is caught in the crossfire, and it really shouldn't be. Science isn't about what someone thinks or how someone feels about something. Science is a rigorous process that we use to gain knowledge about the world and the environment or whatever topic. Right now, we live in a time when STEM is under attack from many, many fronts. And again, it's coming to a head a bit now, but this has been growing for years. We are looking at massive cuts to funding for science. Hopefully, Congress is going to stave off the worst of these, but they can be really substantial. Give you some idea of what the president's budget called for. 40% cut of the National Institute of Health, 14% cut Department of Energy, a 47% cut to NASA, a 57% cut to the National Science Foundation. Really unprecedented cuts in our science agencies. We have already lost thousands of scientists from our federal agencies and from other institutions supported or underpinned by federal dollars at universities, at national labs, at independent research labs. These are scientists that in many cases we as a country have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars training. We are seeing websites and data disappearing off of websites. I would argue this is the modern case of book burning, right? Especially for a science like ocean science, where environmental data is critical to modeling and forecasting and making informed decisions. We have built up databases over decades. Again, this country has invested in monitoring, and we're now losing access to that data, which I think should just really upset everybody because we paid for that data. We are seeing students with aspirations in science that are reading the paper, that are at universities where their professors are getting fired or their grants are getting cut. And they're having a hard time struggling to see a future. And I'm fielding a lot of calls. I was a college professor for 23 years, and I'm getting calls from former students and who are trying to figure out what to tell their own students. And then really troubling is all of this is taking place during a time where other countries are following our lead. They are basically taking the playbook that we have used since World War II, and they are following at the very time we are dismantling the ecosystem of science agencies that we have been building up since the war. What are we facing in ocean science? We've lost half of our research fleet over the last 50 years. And right now, we just lost another ship that was retired. It was 50 years old. It needed to be retired. And that was about 6 weeks ago. So we now have 16 ships in the U.S. research fleet that scientists all around the country use to access the ocean. By comparison, China has built 64 research vessels in the last 20 years, most of those in the last 10. And that's a number that I've been using for a year and a half. So I would be very surprised if it's still only 62. We, for months, have gone over the last several years, for months on end, we have gone without a working icebreaker in the Arctic. The Soviet Union has, oh my God, I just said the Soviet Union. Sorry. Russia has around 51 icebreakers, depending on how you count as icebreakers. Even China has 5 icebreakers with another one being built. How can the United States now be in a situation where we have to call on other countries because we don't have a working icebreaker? Especially what we are looking at in the environment with the reduction in ice. This is a major economic opportunity in the Arctic, and we need the infrastructure in place if we're going to take advantage of it. We currently have no U.S. ship dedicated to the U.S. Antarctic program. Our U.S. bases in Antarctica are going to be redeployed with an icebreaker we are leasing from Ukraine. How ironic is that? We have lost our deep sea drilling ship. This was the JOIDES resolution, which is what was used to do very deep cores that was important to the study of past climate, petroleum investigations. It's a one-of-a-kind ship. We've lost ours. China just launched everybody's dream of a drill ship last year, brand new. So, but before I go on and say anything else about it, I'm going to do what I think we should demand of anyone who presumes to tell us anything. I'm going to tell you who I am and where I'm coming from. Sarah already went through my CV, but where am I coming from as a person? So, one, I'm a middle child. Now, why do I think that's important to share? One is middle children tend to be peacekeepers. I don't know if there's any middle children in the room. And peacekeeper has been definitely a role I played in my family. It's also a role I seem to be playing more and more at the federal level. I'm about as middle of the road politically as you can find. I think that's probably a function of being a middle child. I was raised in a very conservative family. I work and have a lot of friends that are very liberal, and I've spent my entire adult life trying to advocate one side to the other. It's exhausting, but I think it's what we need to do more and more and more of if we're going to start bridging and bridging the gap between the far right and the far left. I was a professor for 23 years at the College of William and Mary for the last 17 years. So I ran my own lab, I taught classes, I have a good sense of what universities are struggling with now. I was a researcher. I also worked at the National Science Foundation for where I was director of ocean science, as Sarah mentioned. I had a budget of $356 million in that role. So I've seen the inner workings of the federal agencies across the board, and I'm very well versed in NSF. And I will say they are not as broken as a lot of politicians are saying today. At least that was my firsthand experience. And I've also been a businesswoman. I have owned real estate most of my adult life, so I don't sit in flowing white robes in some ivory tower somewhere. I am a businesswoman trying to keep the lights on at Bigelow. I watch economic forecasts very carefully. A lot of scientists do. So we are, I feel like, not as out of touch as sometimes we are portrayed. But the real reason that I'm here and I'm giving a talk about this and not just Bigelow's research, which is amazing, is because I have spent my entire life serving my two great loves, and that is the ocean and this country. And I think the attack on science we're seeing has been building for decades, and it is endangering both of them in very real ways. And I personally don't see how we get out of this mess without a real grassroots movement of people that care enough to get out there. So the people that are showing up on this call, I'm so grateful. We've got to put down our phones, we've got to turn off the hate on our screens, and we've got to show up and start talking to each other and hearing different perspectives. So I am so grateful that you showed up to talk to me today. And as I go through this talk, I am going to try to insert my third great love. So 8 years ago, my 8th anniversary will be coming up in February. I met my third great love, and that was the people of Bigelow Laboratory, which is just amazing. We are an independent nonprofit lab in rural East Boothbay. We study phytoplankton, bacteria, viruses, basically the basis of the ocean food web. That's the start of everything, actually, including half the oxygen we're breathing right now. We only pay our scientists 12 weeks of salary a year. The rest they need to get by through competitive grants and contracts. And about half of that funding comes from federal agencies. So when I talk about massive cuts to federal agencies, this is really an existential crisis for a place like Bigelow. It's also an existential crisis for research programs at universities and national labs all across the country. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you're going to see why that should concern all of us. Okay, so the rest of the time I'm going to spend talking about three things: how we compare to other countries, how is research funding distributed in this country in a really practical way. It occurred to me that until I was in my fourth year of grad school, I didn't know how science worked in this country. Most people don't, most voters don't. And what do we get for the research investment that we as a nation make? So starting off with that first one, how do we compare with other countries? This is, oh, and by the way, I have references at the bottom of all of my slides on where I got the data from or what I'm saying. I'm happy to share my slides with anybody that wants them, just let me know. So this is gross domestic expenditures in research and development. These are billions of current US dollars, so this is not corrected for inflation. And the big two things I want you to take away here, this is going from 2000 to 2022. And we are looking at, this data is coming from a national and engineering statistics report that is put out every 2 years by the government. And they cover different topics in any given year. And so that's why there wasn't anything more recent. Two things to take home about this, though, is one, the United States has just spent more money than other countries. The second is over the last 25 years, China has gone from basically a non-entity in science funding and investment, you can see here in the blue line, and is now, it would not surprise me if those two lines haven't crossed each other as we go out to 2025. And that is even before the large cuts in funding we're facing. Then this is within the United States, the billions of current, this is again, billions of current US dollars, not funded, not corrected for inflation. And this is showing what different entities. So business is the largest supporter and always has been of research and development dollars. The federal government has been fairly flat. And what is so critical about those dollars, though, is those underpin everything that we do. For business investments, they are making that investment to benefit their business. They are developing a product or a service or a process. They tend to keep their information to themselves because it's proprietary. They don't want that information to benefit the competitors. So it's not widely available. And they will fund things that they believe will have immediate payoff. And so it's that federal investment in basic research investigations, right? So a pharmaceutical business is not going to be able to invest over 30 years on how cell membranes work. They're going to look at that literature. They're going to have an idea of a new delivery system to get their drug into cells. And they can then invest their money into developing that drug because that fertile ground of knowledge is already there. So that federal investment enables the business investment. One of the most important distinguishing characteristics of US science compared to other countries is we have been where the best and the brightest from around the world have wanted to come to be educated and to do science really since the Second World War. Now, there's a lot of famous scientists like Einstein that came over during the Second World War, before and after, but really it was much broader than that. Between 2,000 and 3,000 scientists from all disciplines, from many different nationalities and ethnicities came here, and we welcomed them. We were very strategic about the scientists that we brought here, and that is a big reason for our success. Even if we could fill all of our jobs with Americans, people trained, born and trained in this country, we would still be missing a really important piece. If you want to solve a serious problem, your best chance of doing that is to get as many different brains around the table, right? A kid that grows up on a farm in the Midwest and a kid that grows up rich in Manhattan are going to see the world differently. You can maximize that if you then get a kid from Nigeria and somebody from Paris, right? Our big part of our success is we have a lot of different brains that bring different frames of reference. It is not something we can mimic completely in-house. It's just not how it works. One evidence for this is Nobel Prizes. Between 2000 and 2023, 112 US scientists won Nobel Prizes in medicine, physics, or chemistry. Right? So these are people that have made really transformative discoveries that were responsible for major advances. 45 of those people were born in other countries, right? Which is much greater than the percentage that they make up in this country. When you come from somewhere else, you bring a different frame of reference. It's critical. And one threat we have right now is while we are throwing away these scientists we've been training, and we have a generation that is really struggling to know whether they should invest in trying to have a career in science. Other countries are seeing what's happening and they are laying out the welcome mat. Recently, $1.7 billion was declared over the next 13 years by Canada to try to entice people across the borders. Europe, the EU has a major recruiting effort going on. All through Asia, major recruiting efforts going on, trying to get US scientists over to their countries. And this is a loss that we will not feel it right away, but we will not be the same country in 20 years if this continues. So how is research funding actually distributed? So it all starts with an idea, okay? And as simple as that sounds, when you go to college, as a scientist, you major in a subject and you start learning about that subject. And then you usually go on to grad school and you dive in deeper and deeper. And then from that point on, if you are a researcher, your job really is to look for areas where you can move knowledge forward on that area. I'll give you an example. This is a researcher on the right is Doug Rasher, who is a ecologist. And the newly minted PhD student, Shane Farrell, was his PhD student. And Shane did a very high profile project because he was observing these changes in the environment in coastal Maine, where these beautiful, vibrant kelp areas were being taken over by this invasive red algae. Why was this happening? What was the chemistry behind that happening? What were the ecological impacts? So these were the ideas that they wanted to follow up on. Now, to do science, you need funding. So if there are scientists in the room that this is old hat, I apologize. But a lot of people have never really heard this. So if you want to try to get funding from any of the federal agencies, it all starts with a proposal. Most federal proposals are around 15 pages. They are for programs that run 3 to 5 years. This is the cover sheet for the National Science Foundation. In order to do that, why is this? Let me move this thing out of the way. It's getting in my way. These proposals basically are a written example of the scientific method, where I said it's not about how you think or feel about something. There is very rigorous protocols that you follow to try to advance scientific knowledge, known as the scientific method. Your proposal needs to lay out any prior studies, right? The funders want to know, have you done your homework? Do you know what's already been done in this area? You don't want to reinvent the wheel. Yes, it's not working. Preliminary data is pretty important nowadays. That you have to have some kind of proof of concept. This is where a lot of research institutions can really struggle, because if you don't have the funding to get the preliminary data, you could be dead in the water. So richer institutes just keep getting richer, and poorer institutes have, a real problem trying to get the money to show this proof of concept. You have to lay out a very specific hypothesis or question. What exactly are you going to show and do as a result of this work? And then you have to be very specific about the experiments and the methods, and they have to be detailed enough. So to be honest, these things are snooze fest to read. Nobody's going to want to read these unless you're an expert in this. But you have to lay out in enough detail that anybody reviewing this can say, yeah, if you do these experiments and you do them correctly, they will in fact answer the hypothesis or the question you've laid out. And yes, you're using the state-of-the-art methods. You're not using some backwards approach, or if you are, you're justifying why that is. And then to lay out why it's important. Why is it important to advance this area of research? What do you think this can lead to in the future? In the case of NSF, it's just leading to the next advance. It doesn't necessarily have to be a concrete product. And then you have to show results of prior support. If the US government invested in you in the past, what did they get for it? And you better have something to show, or you're going to have a hard time getting that next grant. And then there's an exhaustive citation list, because everything you've put in there, you have to justify in the peer-reviewed literature, right? You can't just pull something out of Time magazine, right? You need to justify this work and show that you are very clearly building on past research and why that research is important. And then you lay out a budget. What is all this going to cost? How much of my time will it take? Do I need money to travel? Do I need money for supplies? And then you have to send it to an agency. Now, in this particular case, the questions they were asking were really fundamental questions about why that ecosystem was changing. So that's a National Science Foundation. NSF is the foundational organization in the federal government that exists to advance the frontiers of science and engineering in all fields. Then there are a whole suite of agencies. Around 33 federal agencies support some sort of research or development. And I term these mission agencies. They're called mission agents. They have a specific mission. These are agencies that are important for Bigelow's work. For example, the Office of Naval Research. ONR exists to advance knowledge in the ocean battle space. Their mission is to help this country win a war at sea if it needs to. All of these agencies rely on the basic knowledge that is generated by NSF. So, for example, NASA is not going to fund basic information about optics that could lead to a telescope that could fund something on a NASA project. That's NSF's purview. NASA is going to take that knowledge and do something with it to accomplish their mission. So you submit that proposal after you've spent all night working on it for weeks on end. You send it into the agency, any agency, and then that agency has experts that are hopefully very broad, and they know the community. Their job, program officer's job, is to know who does what out in the science world, not just in the US, but internationally, because they need to send that proposal out to experts in the field to review it. NSF would send anywhere from 7 to 10 reviews, hopefully getting 3 to 4 back. Those reviewers then review that proposal and send back their thoughts. This is peer review. It's being reviewed by other scientists. Some of the key things, they're experts in the field, right? I was working at the hairy edge of nitrogen chemistry research. There's only a handful of people that are going to be able to really judge whether I had any good ideas, because I was in the far geeky area of nitrogen. You need input from those people to really judge whether what I was doing was worth the time. They are anonymous, right? You don't want junior researchers giving good reviews to senior researchers to suck up to them. You want everybody to be very honest and to be able to tell the truth and what they really think without any kind of problems. Scientists volunteer their time to do these. You're not paid for most federal reviews, but you do benefit from them because you see what your colleagues are thinking of years before it's going to end up in a peer-reviewed publication. Your job, if you approach it correctly, is to evaluate and to try to help them improve, right? I think of reviewing these proposals as, these are my tax dollars that are going to be invested. Is this a good investment? You want to be as unbiased as you possibly can, and you want to make sure that this country is investing their money in smart ways. And I would argue that this is not something that a few political appointees can do. They just can't, right? A handful of people cannot replace this very robust part of our science enterprise in this country. And that is one of the things that is currently being discussed and implemented in the agencies, where a handful of political appointees will have to approve every grant coming out of an agency. It's very worrisome. Okay, so then hopefully you get those reviewers. They send their reviews back to NSF in this case, or NIH if this was a development of a new drug or something. And then that agency has to put together the portfolio. And in this case, ocean science, what do we want to invest our dollars in the study of the ocean across all of the ocean disciplines? This is what the US is going to invest in. I just cannot stress how determined and ethical and dedicated the people I worked with were at NSF. And so many of those people were like me. They just come up to serve and then they go back to their day job, because you don't want a small number of people to control this. You always want new blood. It's a fabulous system. I hate the thought that it's being eroded. One of the biggest things about federal funding is that success rates are very low. When I was at NSF, our biological oceanography program had a success rate of proposals in to proposals funded of 8%. That meant 92% of the people that submitted proposals were denied. So this idea that we are randomly funding widespread waste, fraud, and abuse by throwing money around is just not anything that I ever saw. You have to get through so many hoops to actually get funded. It's actually quite difficult to get funded. So then you get funded, and then you have to do the work. So for a place like Bigelow, in some cases, it's just mining data sets, right? It's going online, it's accessing massive data sets to try to address questions that these data sets can answer. And that's why I'm so concerned about the loss of environmental data online. In other cases, we have facilities where we can set up controlled experiments, where we can control different variables to really tease out what might be happening in the marine environment. Sometimes those experiments get done in little bottles, right? Depending on the organisms you're working with. Sometimes we have to go out to sea, either on our small boat, the Bowditch, or we ask for time on ships in the U.S. research fleet. For example, Ben Twining, one of our scientists, just left and is going to the Southern Ocean and to do looking at trace metal limitation of how fast cells can grow in the ocean by the amount of minerals that are in trace metals are in there. This is a shot I always include because this is from my last cruise to the Arctic, and this was just midway through. So another thing you do in these projects, you collect massive numbers of samples at times, and then you will spend years often in your lab analyzing all those samples using whatever facilities that you need. So it's a long, drawn-out process that is very rigorous. Okay, but what do we get for that? What do we get for the investments we make in these agencies and the scientists that actually do manage to get funded? The first thing we get is publications in science journals, and these are peer-reviewed publications. So if you've heard the phrase publish or perish, oftentimes it's said negatively. If I don't publish my results, I should never have bothered doing that work. The only way future people, pharmaceutical companies, fertilizer companies, fisheries organizations know what I've learned about nitrogen in the ocean is if I publish that in peer-reviewed publications that are then there in perpetuity. So publications are really key. And sometimes those publications, one of the beauties of AI is it makes it easier for us to find relevant publications that can be quite old, where you used to have to just sit and look through these things. So publication is really key. Another thing I would suggest we get from our investment in science is a big chunk of the US's GDP, gross domestic product, which is around $28 trillion. $28 trillion. Just think about that. It's massive. Now, if you look and tease that apart, if you look at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and the industries and services that it underpins, it's about 69% of our GDP can be linked back to science in some way. 67% of the jobs in this country can be linked back to science in some way. And another key thing about these jobs is jobs in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or that require expertise in those areas, also tend to be higher paying jobs. The median salary is $69,000 in STEM fields. Median salary is $49,600 in non-STEM fields. So they also tend to be better jobs. They're the kind of jobs you want your kids and your grandkids going after. Another huge thing we get is it drives our military, right? If we go to war, we want the best weapons, the best instrument system, the best knowledge of the battle space, whether it's the air or the ground or the ocean. This investment in science is a huge part of our national security and increasingly our cybersecurity. I shouldn't have said increasing. It's all of our security and cybersecurity. Then it trickles down into things we use every day. This was an advertisement that is a mock-up because I couldn't find the old advertisement. But it basically said, love your iPhone, don't thank Apple, thank the US government. In 2007 to 2024, over $2 trillion was generated by sales of iPhones alone. It's been a massive economic boom. And yet all of the grants that went into that, right? 30 years ago, looking at miniaturization and computer science, the investment in GPS that was made through DARPA, the development of composite materials like the screens and the touch screens, social science grants that studied how our brains interact with technologies so that you could make a user-friendly interface. Without all of that previous investment, Steve Jobs and the engineers at Apple wouldn't have anything to work with, and we wouldn't have a phone in our pocket. Something more recent, the research into the venom from Gila monsters was a critical piece of developing Ozempic and Wegovy, which are two weight loss drugs. In 2024, those two drugs alone generated $26 billion in revenue, right? So what may seem like silly science, and there was a great article right here in American Scientist about, you hear stories in the press about the silly stuff that we invest in. It makes me sad that people believe that we don't have more trust in the success of the science we see all around us. The United States does not invest in silly projects, or at least I haven't seen it. Actually, I probably can't say that 100%. Here's where I'm going to be a science geek and qualify what I said 20 different ways. There probably is some waste, fraud, and abuse. It is not widespread, and you should dig deeper if you hear something that sounds silly, because this sounds silly, and yet look what it led to. Then there was the internet, right? The digital economy in 2024 generated $16 trillion. One of the key things, this was developed, the first internet was developed by DARPA. But one of the really key things in developing internet traffic protocols was the studies that had been done on swarming bees and foraging and how connections were made. You never know where you're going to get the inspiration and what it's going to lead to. Then there's kind of the granddaddy of all projects, the Human Genome Project. DOE, Department of Energy, and the National Institute of Health invested about $3.8 billion in this project. But it's led to 300,000 jobs, close to $1 trillion in economic output. And that just keeps rolling out and continuing. Oh, sorry about that. I was supposed to delete that second one. And the rollout from that, from the Human Genome Project is something that we use every day, right, at the lab. So this is just one example of one of our projects. This is Melissa Rocker. She's a postdoc, and she is studying epizootic shellfish disease in lobsters, right? By using the tools that originally were developed decades ago and have been refined ever since, we can now use it to study what organisms are in an environment and how it can be looking at disease progression in an individual organism. So these tools ramp out to many different areas. And now I want to take us to end back to where I started, and that is with children. So this is a shot, and I know it's a sad shot, so I'm going to take it off really quick. This is little KJ, who was born with a very rare genetic disease, but he received a personalized gene therapy treatment, and this is him now, or shortly after that. He goes home a healthy child. This is the personalized medicine we hear about. It was the promise that they talked about in the Human Genome Project when they were trying to get it off the ground, and we're really seeing the fruition of that. Imagine what this family would look like if he hadn't received that treatment. So, this is just one of the reasons why the United States should not back away from our commitment to investing in research in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It helps our kids every day. So, what are my take home messages? One, investing in research is the seed for our future prosperity, national security, and health. Without that seed, we're going to see things shrivel up, and we will not be the economic, military, or technology powerhouse that we are today. Peer review should determine U.S. research investments. We want researchers to weigh in on what gets funded. It is also an important part of their continual training, right? If you are constantly reading the cutting edge research, it makes you a better researcher as well. And we need the best and the brightest to want to be here, right? I am terrified of what this country looks like if we no longer are the destination, and we are not the destination most scientists in the world want to come to. We have made it a pretty hostile place for people from other countries to come. And we are missing all of that passion and intelligence and training that should be benefiting us. So what can you do? Show up, ask questions, and vote, right? Increasingly, we want politicians to be able to speak intelligently about how science is done in this country. So much of what happens within our communities, our economy, our health centers, our schools starts off in research. They should be much more adept at responding to questions about them. Let your elected representatives know you support science and that you expect them to as well, right? We need to keep the pressure up because it has been working. It looks like we are going to stave off the worst of the federal funding. Now the question is, if we are able to do that, will money still flow out of the federal agencies? I'll give you one example. We are 90% down at Bigelow in terms of funding from our federal agencies this year. We haven't received a yes or a no on any grant we have submitted this year. It's just silence. And then the final thing is I feel guilty that I didn't talk more about Bigelow. Come to see Bigelow to see science in action. I know you can see it there at Herring Gut. Come, I'd love to give anybody that's interested a tour. We give tours of the facilities. It's an amazing place full of amazing people doing good things for the world. And with that, I will stop sharing and answer any questions.
Thank you for your talk.
Thank you. Wonderful.
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Cartwright. Hello. Yeah. So you talk about other countries investing in ocean science and research, and that all sounds great. I'm not sure why that is a big concern. I mean, couldn't there be collaboration or cooperation between countries and shared goals rather than, I've got mine, you've got yours, I'm going to do better than you kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Europe, right now, other countries, European countries, Japan, are helping us by getting our scientists out to sea because the money is just dried up to even use some of our ships. So absolutely, other countries investing in science is a great thing. Some countries are better at sharing what they learn than others. Some countries are better partners than others. I had friends that went on I think 6-week cruise on a Russian science ship. And when the crew, they did experiments the whole time. And when they were getting off the ship and they were packing up all of their samples to ship home, the Russian says, you can't have them. Mm. So some countries are excellent partners. Europe has been an amazing partner with us for, decades and decades. But not all countries have the same openness in the way they do science, the way they share science, and the way they collaborate with science. And China doesn't have a great track record. And bottom line, I still want us to be the best.
I guess I have a question. I wonder, so a couple years back, at least, was 10, maybe 10 years ago. My daughter participated in a Women at Sea program, this collaboration with Hurricane Island and then they ended up at Bigelow doing presentations and studying for I don't know, learning to prepare their presentations. I just wonder, are you currently collaborating with Hurricane or any other organization like that for allowing younger students to get involved?
I don't know if we have a formal collaboration with Hurricane Island right now. I mean, I'm in contact with Bo frequently. Hopefully he'll be there Friday at the Maine Marine Science Consortium meeting. But one of the things, one investment Bigelow made a few years ago is we professionalized our education staff. So now we have a marine educator who's a professional educator. And we have a who's now our director of education, and we have a education coordinator who again is professional. So with these two, with Evan and Aislinn in place, we are doing more partnerships with K through 12 with younger students, which are actually kind of a tough nut for us because they can't be unsupervised in our labs. You know, we've got $1 million instruments that, I mean, I love me some kids. I love me some dogs too. It breaks my heart we don't allow dogs, but our lab is very open and the dogs could just wander. And I don't know about your dog, but my dog will eat anything and I don't want them eating something off of a lab floor. But now with our new, we have a new education and innovation center with dedicated teaching labs. Right. So we can be very specific about what we put in there to make sure that it is both safe and also there's, they can break everything in there because students break things and they should break things. But if they break some of our things, we're really out of business for some of the research that we do. So to answer your question, I don't know of any formal specific project like that with Hurricane right now, but we are starting to bring lots of K through 12 kids through our building because we finally have the kind of space where we can do that easily without just shutting down science in a given lab.
I think it was a nice opportunity, just even for them to practice, science thinking, right? And, look at how to break down their projects. But the other thing I just wanted to, my son went to Dalhousie, got a degree in ocean studies from Dalhousie. And he is, at this point, I think he's hoping to go back for a master's there, but he probably will want to, come back and practice something, the ocean related in the States. I don't think we've lost him in Canada, but the price is.
I don't want to lose anybody I mean, I love me some Canada, but I don't want to lose any of our scientists in Canada. I'm very selfish.
And Herring
But
Gut could
Dalhousie's
definitely.
a great school. They are very strong in marine science.
And we are looking to provide more of a role in bringing students out to Bigelow, to the Darling Marine Center. And we can talk a little bit more about how the Marine Ocean Leadership Team works and how the Maine Marine Science Consortium works. But this is a meeting that we go to frequently. Like I said, we hosted it here at Herring Gut. So we hosted each of the different organizations so we can all see what kind of facilities we have, so we can meet all the educators and scientists, and so we can collaborate. And I've been seeing exponential collaboration between all these groups. And that is one thing we can be very grateful for in the state is the cooperation between all these groups has been just amazing.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And Sarah, a big shout out to you because I don't know if you've missed a MOLT meeting, have you?
No, I have not. No,
You are right in the middle of it.
Absolutely.
Can I just say one other point about to that the question that I just answered? One of the things that I have really tried to push at Bigelow and through Maine Marine Science Consortium is Maine does not have a lot of huge institutes. Bigelow is one of the larger marine labs in the state, but we are not a large marine lab, right? Woods Hole is 10 times our size on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. So we each, I feel like, have a role to play, right? So we are a basic research entity that's really trying to push the envelope and moving more into um, commercial activities as well, right? I cannot deliver the kind of day in, day out experience for a 10-year-old that Sarah can. That's not who we are. That's not how we're set up. And so, yes, I love that we are bringing more kids, especially from our local community. But I think in the state, we have this really great network of very strong institutions where they are really good at what they do. And we shouldn't all try to be everything because then we're going to have a bunch of mediocre, middle of the road kind of institutions that are jack of all trades. I think that specialization and knowing your lane and then partnering with people like Hearing Gut that can deliver. I mean, God, that your hydroponics lab is amazing. And really hands-on. I mean, that's what kids need day in and day out. And we're just not set up to deliver on something like that.
Thank you for the kind words. So we are going to arrange for a field trip with everyone. Go ahead.
Come on down.
Okay, so hang on, back in 2016, there was a real fear that science was under threat. So I remember a bunch of scientists getting together and saying, okay, we're gonna protect the information that's out there and we're gonna do like data downloads and safeguard all that data. I have not heard of anything since that. I'm thinking about it because you said there's data and information that's no longer accessible. So what became of that effort?
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to in 2016. And there was a lot of threats, but there wasn't a lot of action. I think the difference now is that it's happening, right? But there are also through things like AAAS, through that's the American Association for the Advancement of Science, through American Geophysical Union. There's lots of discussion on who's taking what and where it is. In the ocean space, there's places like Schmidt Ocean Institute, which is funded by Wendy and oh shoot, what's his name?
Eric.
Thank you. And Eric Schmidt, that put in money to like really address the situation quick. So I don't know if that anything has been perpetually lost. The problem is getting access, right? Knowing where it is. It used to be on, you could go to NOAA and you knew you had access to the most up-to-date, quality controlled data, really around the world in many cases.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we have lost it, but what we have made it is very difficult in some cases to find it and access it. And I worry, okay, this is a critical issue right now.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to figure out how to make sure we've got backups of everything. If this is still going on in 3 years, half those people are no longer doing what they're doing now because they didn't get funded and university enrollment has dropped by a half. It's how long this is perpetuated.
Right.
That really scares me. I don't think anything is permanently lost at this point. But I'll tell you, it's a lot harder to find things than it used to be in some cases. Or you find it and it hasn't been updated in 9 months.
Yeah.
There's a lot of organizations going and doing everything from screenshots to data downloads. They're actually squirreling away in different servers, which we shouldn't have to do.
So
No.
it really could be down to human people,
Yeah.
the hollowing out of different agencies and that person is gone, so that information's not updated. Therefore, you can't get the most recent data. It might be continuing to be generated somehow, some way that somebody didn't press the buttons to make it go or sync or whatever. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Or even, we have a lot of autonomous measuring platforms now. We've got buoys and floats, and as long as those things keep working and data's coming in, we're fine. It's when they have a problem and there's nobody there that knows how to fix it, or there's nobody there that knows how to train the new guy in 3 years how to fix it because they have they've you know they're no longer at the agency.
Well,
The
and I know,
other thing that is very stressful about the way the agencies were downsized is there was no strategy about who was let go or who was offered retirement. And because a lot of the science staff at these agencies are just really committed to what they're doing, but also it's not that easy for them to find another job. A lot of the people that took the buyouts were the office staff. If you're a senior accountant, you can get a job in a lot of places, probably for more money than NSF was paying you. So, one question, and we hired the former head of geosciences back to Bigelow to be our vice president of admissions and operations, because he wanted to get, he saw the writing on the wall. The hammer was coming down on him any day. And even if the money is there, if the staff isn't there to process the grants and that can then track the grants once the money is given to an institution, everything comes to a stop, even though the decisions have been made. And there's a lot of separation of jobs, which you want, right? The scientists that are making the decisions are not the ones that hand that money out. That is done by financial folks. So it's just the dysfunction within the agencies right now from just, sometimes all the people in a given job left. So one piece of that cog is no longer there at all.
Got it.
I know for many of my friends at the USDA, NSF, NIH, and Smithsonian were let go or had reductions in force that would happen like on a Friday afternoon, and they wouldn't. I'm part of the Stellwagen Bank Advisory Council with NOAA, and they literally, they wrote us on Friday and said, we cannot respond to an email tomorrow. They're not allowed back at their desk. They're not allowed back on their computer. It's almost impossible to download, your entire computer, which it's illegal to do in many cases, onto a hard drive and walk out with it. So the way that things were reduced for most of the National Science Foundation, when they shut down their building and said, get out, we're going to move HUD in there. So that's why so many folks like Deb and Glenn and myself are speaking out, because it's a true emergency.
Yeah, and that NSF building was specially designed for NSF. They moved into it like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Moving all their staff to, they couldn't even take a direct line on the metro from their old one. They had to change trains. So it's just it's a disaster on so many levels.
Go ahead.
And yet there are still people every day just dealing with incredible adversity that are committed and are doing the best they can to hold it all together. I mean, we have incredible scientists in our federal government. I really applaud them.
I just wonder what is happening right now. Are people being hired back, or is somebody actually evaluating these losses to say, okay, we need to refill positions? Or
to my knowledge, no hiring is happening. To my knowledge, no hiring is happening, at least at NSF. At least Jim came in June. And so before then, it just wasn't happening. So it would have to be retraining people and moving people around. But I don't know at that level.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for NOAA, for NIH, but that's the same thing I've heard. Thankfully, most of my high-level friends, like one of my close friends is the head of the National Permit Agency for NEPA. So she's in charge of all federal projects permitting for environmental permits. And she's been able to work from home because she's thankfully written into 25 pieces of legislature. So there's not enough people to unwrite her out of the legislature. So she's still doing her job. But I haven't heard of anyone being hired. And the big problem when you go on to different sites for the federal government is you try to find someone who works there. If I look for my friend at the USDA that works for the Smithsonian, he's no longer listed on the website. He's still
Yeah.
there, but you cannot contact him about Microlepidoptera. He's in charge of moths, evaluating moths for all shipments coming into the United States for biosecurity reasons. He's very high up at the Smithsonian. As far as a civilian can tell, he no longer works there. There's no contact information, no phone, no email. So it's divorcing the American public from our taxpayer-funded science and from the people that, and there's nothing they can do, to do.
Yeah.
Certain facilities and universities are able to even plan graduate programs and doctorate programs in the future.
The point.
Yeah, they can't. We've seen in RECOS this national entity. In most cases, they've dropped their incoming graduate class by half, and in some cases, they're not taking any because, right, a PhD needs 4 to 6 years of funding, and if you don't know, and we're all in the same boat. I mean, we didn't get a single decision on a federal grant last year. Just think about that. Not, I would, not a decline, right? So I don't even know where to begin. Where to begin? Do we have a real problem at some point? Are the gates going to open? The money's there. They have the money. They've been appropriated the money for many of these programs. So I don't know.
But we've seen what has happened with that. They've just, it's appropriated, but we're not going to let them actually
Exactly.
get the money.
Spend it, right? Are they going to get the budgets they wanted no matter what is appropriated?
Right.
Yeah.
The only good
Okay,
thing-
but you know what? There's a lot
Positive.
of good I've been one of my New Year's resolutions is I'm not going to just vent.
Yes. So tell us
Right? We're
something
doing
you're-
everything we can to try to think proactively and to look for other sources of revenue and mobilize the science community. And we're going to pump everybody up, right, Sarah, on Friday.
That's right. We have our next MOLT meeting on Friday.
No, our main, this is a big one. This is the Maine Marine Science Consortium.
Yeah.
And then if we are unsuccessful, we'll all have wine at 4:30.
Yeah. You had a question, Julie?
Appreciated collaborations with artists from Bigelow and Herring Gut. And I think that there is a lot of development in ways that microscopic elements, sea creatures, discoveries with types of cameras that can go into deeper waters and have enough lighting to take accurate photographs of newly discovered, I think, organisms. And it just seems like to keep science within the realm of people involved with science is small, and that the art is one of the ways that it can open it into the lives of more people to enter into conversation. And I
couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And in fact, the reason why Bigelow has, we've got 3 different art installations at the lab right now. One of the new things about our new center is it has a lot of wall space because we had glass walls. So we really had very little place to hang. We work with things you cannot see, right?
Yes.
We don't.
Julie has the beautiful coccolithophore. She's the creator of that. She's famous.
Is that who's there? Is that
That's
Julie?
who's asking you the question. And she's also
okay.
behind
Yeah, you're one of the installations, Julie.
yes.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. You make I love, in fact, I just gave a tour on Friday where we started off at the giant coccolithophore, and then I took them over to the satellite images of coccolithophore blooms, and then over to the culture collection and showed them a culture of coccolithophores, which is very boring because they just look clear. So no, it's amazing.
Where I was going with that is that I am curious about, and I think that it probably took a lot of research to figure out how to even create a scanning electron microscope. And I know they're very expensive, but I'm wondering what's the status of the scanning electron microscope at Bigelow?
We're getting a new one if it's not already in. That is a benchtop one because the old ones, they were very expensive to use and to maintain. And then it was also, you had to be very skilled at preparing the samples. So my understanding, at least this is what they told me to get my support for purchasing it, is that this new benchtop one is much easier to maintain and is much more user friendly. So we have Mike Lomas and Barney Bulch before he left. So I think we've got a new one.
Nice. I've used one and a 20-year-old one, and I would love to try a new one. We have time for like one or two more questions. You all good?
I actually, I'm sorry, I thought this went till 2.
Oh, funny.
And
So
well, if I could just shove food into my face before my 2:30, I would be so thrilled because I'm starving. I did not get chili, Katie. Thank you all for
I'll see
showing
you-
up and listening to me. And yeah, I'll see you Friday.
Yep, Friday.
Sarah.
Sounds great,
And
Deb.
hello,
Thank you.
sorry I didn't recognize you, Julie. You're like 5 centimeters tall on my screen.
Thanks to Katie. Thank you, Deb. Go eat, and I'll think a few more people.
Okay.
Thanks to West Bay Rotary.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to Bigelow. Thanks to this consortium of all of these different organizations. Thanks to Katie for setting up a great program. February 5th, we've got, who's coming from DMR? Oh, yes, with the Nearshore Survey Program, which is a great way to understand what we're seeing pelagically, surface, and other things in the ocean, what kind of creatures are out there. Great to have Julie here so that we can, the sturgeon is, I'm actually writing an article about it for a Maine magazine, so about sturgeons as a whole. So thanks for being such a great inspiration. Thanks to all of you for being here and making our days and weeks and months. And then make sure and participate in our other programs. And keep in touch. We can send around a list for doing a field trip. I've been dying to take people out to Bigelow. So we do we transition from cabin fevers to our spring fevers, and those are field trips to like the Damascotta Fish Platter. We did an Eclipse field trip last year. So I think a Bigelow field trip, and maybe with a stop at the Darling Marine Center, would be part of the course. So thank you all so much. And thanks everyone on Zoom. Yeah.
Let me stop.
Yep.
Oh. Okay.